Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into a period of immense change today, a real turning point in history.
Oh, absolutely.
Picture it, 1914.
Mm-hmm.
The world erupts into World War I. The British Empire, this massive global force, they're pretty confident, expecting a swift victory.
Right, right.
They figure their own forces will be enough,
Yeah.
but little did they know this war was going to become a global affair, drawing in their colonies and ultimately setting the stage for, well, a complete reshaping of the world. And that's what we're going to explore today, how this war,
Hmm.
initially meant to solidify the British Empire's power, actually planted the seeds for its decline. It's kind of ironic when you think about it.
Yeah, it really is. You see, this wasn't just some, European conflict. World War I demanded an incredible amount of manpower, resources, far more than anyone had anticipated. Britain was forced to lean on its colonies, in a way they never had before.
And that brings us to a pretty mind-blowing fact, something that really illustrates this point. Over 1.4 million soldiers from the colonies fought in this war. And that's on top of the 5 million from Britain itself.
Hmm.
We're talking massive contribution here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It really highlights how significant, the colonies were becoming. They weren't just these far-off outposts anymore. They were becoming vital partners.
They're handing a seat at the table, right?
Exactly. And, this need for colonial support, well, it led to a pretty significant development, the formation of the Imperial War Cabinet in 1917. For the first time, representatives from the Dominions, places like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and even India, they had a voice in shaping war policy.
Wow, that's a big deal. So finally getting some recognition for their efforts.
Right. Now, of course, it's important to remember, Britain still held the ultimate authority, but it was a crack in the old system, a step toward acknowledging the growing influence of the colonies. Things were starting to shift.
Absolutely. And it's really in the trenches of this war where the colonies really proved their mettle. We're talking incredible acts of bravery, like the ANZAC troops at Gallipoli. They faced a brutal campaign. Or the Canadians at Vimy Ridge capturing that strategic stronghold.
Yeah.
These were defining moments, moments that solidified their identities, showcasing their strength, and really demonstrating their commitment to the war effort.
What's really interesting is that these wartime experiences, while they did initially, unite the empire under this common cause, they also sparked a growing sense of self-reliance within the dominions.
I see.
Think about it. They tasted independence on the battlefield. They had shouldered immense responsibility. Their sacrifices had earned them a new sense of respect. So it was only natural that they'd start to, question their subservient role within the empire.
Yeah, like they had come into their own, realized, hey, we're capable, we're strong, maybe we don't need Britain holding our hand anymore.
Precisely.
Right.
And, this newfound confidence, well, it manifested in a number of ways. We saw conscription protests erupt in Canada and Australia.
Oh, great.
People resisted being forced to fight in a war they felt, wasn't really theirs. And in South Africa, you had the Republican movement advocating for complete independence from Britain. It really started gaining traction.
Interesting. So a lot of pushback emerging. And then, of course, there's India, this massive, complex player in the empire, with its own unique story.
Absolutely.
Their contribution to the war effort, it was immense. We're talking huge numbers of troops, plus a staggering 100 million pounds in financial aid in 1917 alone.
Yeah, they really went all in.
But, all this support came with an unspoken expectation, this yearning for something more than just, colonial status. They had proven themselves.
Absolutely. And Britain, they recognized the importance of keeping India on side. So in 1917, they made a pivotal promise, a promise of responsible self-government. Now, of course, the wording was intentionally vague, open to interpretation. But for India, it was a beacon of hope, this glimmer of freedom on the horizon. It was a promise that would have major implications down the line.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
It's like lighting a fuse. And speaking of ripple effects, the war's impact didn't stop there. It reached across the African continent as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Many Africans served in the war, often in really grueling, dangerous roles, or they were recruited as laborers, facing harsh conditions. It wasn't easy.
This experience, especially the hardships, it fueled the growth of independence movements and Pan-Africanism. People began to connect their struggles, realizing, they weren't alone in their desire for freedom and self-governance. It was a powerful realization.
Right. So the seeds of change really start to take root,
Huh.
challenging the old imperial order. And then, of course, the war ends and the world breathes a sigh of relief.
Yeah.
But instead of ushering in an era of, peace and stability, it throws up this whole new set of challenges, particularly with the creation of the League of Nations.
The League of Nations, it was supposed to be this champion of self-determination, guiding former German and Ottoman territories towards independence. But the reality on the ground was much more complicated, especially when it came to the mandate system.
Okay, the mandates. I've always found those a bit murky. Can you shed some light on what they actually were and why they caused so much controversy?
Okay, so imagine this. You're part of a territory that's just been freed from, colonial rule. You're hopeful. You're ready to chart your own course. But instead of getting, full independence, the League of Nations assigns you a mandate. Essentially, it's like temporary guardianship by one of the victorious powers, like Britain or France.
Okay.
The idea, at least on paper, was to prepare these territories for eventual independence. But in practice, it often felt like, well, just another form of colonial control.
So it's like they dressed up colonialism in these new clothes, trying to make it seem, more palatable.
That's a pretty accurate way to put it. And to justify their, continued control, they created these three categories of mandates, A, B, and C, based on, how developed they deemed the territory to be.
Interesting.
So A mandates, places like Palestine, Mesopotamia, they were considered closer to self-governance, while C mandates, like parts of Africa, the Pacific, they were deemed to need much longer periods of guidance, which in reality often meant, indefinite control.
Oh, wow.
It's a classic case of saying one thing and doing another, using this idea of development as a smokescreen for maintaining their grip on power.
And nowhere is this more evident than in the case of Palestine, right?
Right.
A region with immense strategic and economic importance for Britain.
Exactly. Palestine is a prime example of how the mandate system was used to, advance imperial interests under this guise of benevolent guidance. And we can't forget the secret Sykes-Picot Agreement. This is where Britain and France, behind closed doors, basically carved up the Middle East between them.
Hold on. They were making these deals in secret.
Yeah.
Dividing up entire regions like it was like a game of Monopoly.
It's pretty shocking, right?
Yeah.
It completely contradicted the whole principle of self-determination that the League of Nations was supposed to uphold. And then you have the Balfour Declaration, a promise made by Britain in 1917 expressing support for a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine.
Okay.
But here's the problem. Palestine was already inhabited by a large Arab population. So they're making promises to two different groups with competing claims to the same land.
It sounds like a recipe for disaster, setting the
Ah.
stage for, decades of conflict, which, as we know, is exactly what happened.
It was this tangled web of conflicting interests and promises, and it had the potential to unravel, the fragile peace established after the war.
And unravel it did.
Yeah. The mandates, along with, a number of other factors, they fueled resentment, resistance, and ultimately contributed to the further decline of the British Empire. But we'll dive deeper into that in the next part of our deep dive.
It really is incredible to think that a war meant to, strengthen the British Empire actually ended up exposing its vulnerabilities. Like it set in motion this chain of events that would ultimately lead to its decline. It makes you wonder, if things could have gone differently. What if Britain had really listened to those voices rising from its colonies?
Yeah.
Embraced a more collaborative approach, recognizing those aspirations for, self-determination? Would things have played out differently?
It's a fascinating question. Could the empire have adapted? Could it have survived if they had genuinely embraced, a more equal partnership model, recognized the changing world order? I mean, it's impossible to say for sure, but it really highlights the dangers of clinging to these outdated notions of, power and control when the world around you is yearning for change.
It's like that old saying, right? Adapt or die.
They were.
And the British Empire, despite its initial, victories, it seemed reluctant to truly let go of its old ways. Like they failed to grasp the profound shift that was happening.
And that brings us to another pivotal moment that would really test the resilience of the empire. World War II.
Oh,
This devastating conflict engulfing the globe once again, it placed immense strain on Britain, both financially and, militarily. And once again, the colony stepped up, contributed manpower, resources to the war effort. But this time, the demand for independence, it reached a fever pitch.
Yeah, it makes sense. After fighting in another world war, risking their lives for the empire, again, I imagine many in the colonies felt like they had more than earned their right to self-determination. Like, hey, we've done our part twice now.
Exactly. The war had really exposed the limitations of the empire, and those old justifications for colonial rule, they just didn't hold water anymore. And it's during this period that we see the rise of, new superpowers, the United States, the Soviet Union,
Right.
further challenging Britain's position on the world stage. The old order was crumbling and the empire weakened, facing these growing internal pressures. It struggled to maintain its grip.
So it's a fascinating, albeit complex, picture that emerges. You've got global power shifts, the rise of new ideologies, those demands for independence, all these factors intertwining, creating this, perfect storm that would reshape the world. But I'm curious, how did the British Empire actually respond to these challenges? Were there any attempts to adapt, to evolve, or was it purely a story of, resistance and decline?
There were definitely attempts at adaptation, but they were often, too little too late. And one of the most significant examples of this struggle is the case of India.
Right, India.
Remember that promise of responsible self-government made during World War I? Well, that promise was never forgotten.
And I'm guessing the independence movement in India only gained momentum in the years between the wars, right?
Exactly. And it was during this time that a truly remarkable figure emerged on the world stage, Mahatma Gandhi. His philosophy of satyagraha, or nonviolent resistance, it proved incredibly effective in challenging British rule.
Gandhi. His name is synonymous with peaceful resistance. It's almost paradoxical, this unwavering commitment to nonviolence, challenging this empire built on, military might.
It's a testament to the power of ideas, to the inherent human yearning for freedom and self-determination. Gandhi's movement really captured the moral high ground. It exposed the injustice of colonial rule and garnered international sympathy. It put immense pressure on Britain, which was already grappling with the aftermath of World War II, facing criticism on the world stage.
So the tide had really turned. Even the most powerful empires can't stand against the tide of change driven by such a powerful force as the desire for freedom.
And finally, in 1947, after decades of struggle and sacrifice, India achieved independence.
Wow.
It was a monumental event, marking a turning point in the history of the British Empire, and signaling, really, the beginning of the end for colonial rule. The jewel in the crown of the empire, the symbol of British power and prestige, finally breaking free.
It's almost poetic, in a way. But this transition to independence wasn't without its challenges.
Oh, of course not.
The partition of India and Pakistan, the violence, the displacement, it's a reminder that, freedom often comes at a cost.
It's a tragic chapter in history, a stark reminder that the dismantling of empires is rarely a smooth, painless process. The legacies of colonialism, the divisions it created, the wounds it inflicted, they continue to resonate even today. But it's also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, that unwavering pursuit of self-determination, even in the face of, immense adversity.
We've covered a lot of ground. From the battlefields of World War I to those peaceful protests led by Gandhi, we've witnessed the rise and fall of an empire. And as we head into the final part of our deep dive, I have a question. What lessons can we draw from the decline of the British Empire? What can it teach us about power, about change, about the enduring human struggle for freedom? I guess what I'm really asking is, what does it all mean?
That's a question worth pondering. The British Empire's story offers valuable insights into, the dynamics of power, the importance of adaptability, the need to recognize the aspirations of those we govern. But it also raises deeper questions about, the legacies of empire, the impact of colonialism on the world, and that ongoing struggle for justice and equality. We'll delve into these complexities and, explore the enduring impact of the British Empire on the world we live in today as we wrap up our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the British Empire. We've explored its rise, its fall, its triumphs, its struggles. But the story doesn't just, end there. The legacies of this once massive global power continue to shape the world we live in ways both big and small, both visible and invisible. So as we wrap up this journey, I want to grapple with this question that's been kind of lingering in the air. What impact did the British Empire have on the world? What remains of its influence, all these years later?
Well, it's a question with layers. like peeling back the pages of a history book. On the
Mm.
one hand, there are the undeniable scars of colonialism,
Right.
the exploitation of resources, the suppression of local cultures, the political instability that, still plagues many former colonies. These are wounds that haven't fully healed, reminders of, that darker side of empire.
It's impossible to ignore those scars.
Yeah.
The effects of policies and decisions, made generations ago. But I imagine there's also a more, I don't know, complex, nuanced side
Yeah.
to this legacy here.
Absolutely. The British Empire, despite its flaws, it also left behind this complex web of influences. The spread of the English language, for one, the development of infrastructure like railways and ports, the establishment of, legal and educational systems. These are all part of the equation. Many countries adopted these systems, often modeled after British institutions, and they continue to shape their societies today.
So it's not a simple black and white picture. It's this, like, intricate tapestry woven with, threads of progress and exploitation, innovation and oppression.
Yeah.
How do we even begin to make sense of such a contradictory legacy?
Well, I think it starts with recognizing that, judging the past solely through the lens of our present day values can be misleading. The British Empire, like all empires, it was a product of its time. Driven by, a particular set of beliefs and ambitions, we can acknowledge the injustices while also recognizing that societies, like individuals, they evolve, they grow.
Right.
Even the British Empire, throughout its long history, it underwent periods of transformation, responding to changing circumstances and evolving ideas about governance. It wasn't static.
So it's about understanding the context, the complexities, those shades of gray that make up this historical narrative. It's about acknowledging the negative impacts, but also recognizing the changes that occurred over time.
Exactly. And perhaps most importantly, it's about learning from the past, using that knowledge to build a better future. The decline of the British Empire offers valuable lessons for all of us. Lessons about the nature of power, the importance of justice, equality, and that enduring human desire for self-determination.
It seems like the story of the British Empire, while firmly rooted in the past, continues to resonate today. Its rise and fall offer this window into the complexities of human history, the interplay of, power, ambition, and that constant struggle for freedom.
And that's the beauty of history, isn't it? It's not just a collection of dates and events, it's a living tapestry that connects us all. By exploring the past, we gain this deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
As we conclude our deep dive into the shifting sands of the British Empire, I want to leave you with this thought. The empire may have faded, but its legacy continues to shape the world in countless ways. And it's up to us, the inheritors of this complex history, to learn from its triumphs and its mistakes, to strive for a future where justice and equality prevail. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.